But fortunately, not all leaders remain silent to appease those who are just flat out in the wrong. On Monday night, RFK Jr. did an interview on Fox News, during which he did not mince words about the hypocrisy of selective focus when it comes to causes that are supposedly based on principle, not prejudice. He said quite plainly that if people are concerned about true genocides, then Israel is not the problem. The other countries in the Middle East are. As someone whose own father was assassinated by a Palestinian shooter, RFK Jr. pointed out that Jewish and Christian populations have been erased through ethnic cleansings being thoroughly perpetrated all across Arab nations for decades now, pointing out, in 1948, there were 1 million Jews in the Middle East in the Arab countries. Today, there's about 15,000 left. 20% of the population was Christian. Now it's 5%. In Israel, in contrast, there were 150,000 Palestinians in 1948. Today, there's almost 2 million. That would be more than 13 times as many. 20% of the population. That would be 1 in 5. If Israel wanted to commit a genocide against Palestinians, they could do it in a minute. It's doing the opposite. Palestinian population is growing enormously around Israel. There are no Jews in Jordan. There are no Jews in Gaza. The number of Christians in Gaza has dropped by about 80% over the past 10 years. If you want to see where a real genocide is happening, it's not in Israel. It's happening in all the nations around it. You've got to love a politician who isn't afraid to say the unpopular facts, using the unbiased data. The documented records of history back him up on this claim too. Within 30 years of Israel declaring its independence in 1948, somewhere between 850,000 and 900,000 Jews had fled or been expelled from Arab countries. And that number is 1 million Jews if you include Muslim nations expelling them that are not Arab, like Iran and Turkey. The numbers on Christian persecution are also well documented. In Syria, the war that ISIS waged on religious minorities was so brutal that the State Department, the UN, and the European Parliament all formally agreed that it was a genocide. There was no debate over this one or changing of terms and definitions to make it fit. There was complete agreement. Churches were destroyed, as were ancient communities, and hundreds of thousands of Christians were forced to flee Mosul when militant Islamist extremists gave them a choice between converting to Islam, paying a medieval infidel tax, or dying, which, by the way, is the system that Muslims are commanded to create in the Quran. In Iraq, the Christian population has cratered from the 1.5 million that were there prior to the 2003 war to now having only a small sliver of that population left. Save the Children reported that Yazidis fared even worse, writing that the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, ISIS, killed, captured, and displaced all 400,000 Yazidi people living in Sinjar on the 3rd of August 2014 in a genocide that disproportionately affected children. Yes, nearly 500,000 people in one day. That's a genocide. About 10,000 Yazidis were killed or abducted. Half of all those executed were children, according to a report by multinational researchers in the journal PLOS Medicine. The Coptic Christians of Egypt, one of the oldest Christian communities on earth, have endured a relentless string of attacks, from the 2017 Palm Sunday church bombings that killed dozens of them, to a deadly ambush on a busload of pilgrims that same year, and on and on. Watchdog groups say that one region in Upper Egypt has become a war zone for sectarian violence, with Coptic churches being forced into hiding due to intimidation as they live under constant threats of violence for having a different faith. And in Nigeria, advocacy organizations estimate that more than 37,500 people have died since Boko Haram's bloody crusade kicked off in 2009, with the radicalized Fulani violence that we just discussed adding thousands of more victims onto that number. Violence that everyone, including many human rights groups, agree is chiefly driven by religious hatred, even though Nigerian officials and other observers dispute that entirely accurate but inconvenient reality. RFK Jr. doesn't pick and choose which facts suit him and his preferred narrative. He looks at the entire picture, and when you do that, what emerges is clear. The true cleansing of ancient communities of minorities is not happening within the borders of Israel. It is happening within the borders of their unhealthy neighbors. The same reality that has been true for many inconvenient decades.